The Force is often spoken of as power, but what happens when that power is not a weapon or a throne, but a quiet current flowing beneath every star? The answer is the Jedi, an ancient order that would shape galactic history for thousands of years, not through conquest but through listening. The story of the Jedi begins not with blazing lightsabers and roaring starfighters, but with silence, with beings who learned to hear what others could not in the deep past. Before Republic senates and Coruscant skylines, there was only a distant world and a mystery that called to it. That world was Tython, a stormy planet where the Force surged in violent harmony. There, the first Seekers did not call themselves Jedi. They were Jedi wanderers and philosophers who believed in balance between the light side and the dark side, not in the rejection of either. They meditated where Force tempests raged. They built stone temples where the wind itself seemed to whisper ancient truths. And over time they learned that to survive in that place was to listen more than to command. This is the heart of the Jedi. Not warriors first, but interpreters of a current. They did not own monks who charted invisible tides of emotion and destiny. Philosophers who turned visions into codes, and wanderers who crossed the galactic frontier, guided only by a feeling in the Force. When the Jedi path hardened into the Jedi Order, when balance slowly gave way to a stricter devotion to the light side. What followed was a long, quiet promise to stand between fear and those who suffered from it, even as the galaxy around them moved toward conflict and war. How does an order devoted to peace and serenity endure in a galaxy defined by empires rising and falling, by Sith cults whispering in the shadows, by endless cycles of republic and rebellion? And what did it cost them to remain who they believed they were? This question hangs over every era, from the first councils that refined the Jedi Code to the High Republic Knights aboard shining stations such as Starlight Beacon, reaching into the dark of the Outer Rim to offer help rather than domination. Tonight, this journey through Jedi history will unfold as a single unhurried thread, from the storms of Tython and the first Force traditions to the marble halls of the Coruscant Temple, raised above an ancient Sith shrine, from golden ages of exploration to the quiet footsteps of exiled survivors after Order 66, tending fields, healing strangers, hiding their connection to the Force as the Empire hunted them for the next 1,000 years of stories and legends. Names and dates will appear, then drift away. They do not need to be remembered, only felt each era. Another gentle wave in a much larger tide, as the narrative moves from Jedi philosophers to Clone Wars generals, from Luke Skywalker staring at twin suns to the final embers of the Jedi legacy. Let the details pass by softly. There is no need to follow every battle or council decree. Simply rest within the slow rise and fall of this order that tried to listen to the galaxy, even when the galaxy screamed in fear and anger. What they found there would change everything, and in the calm between each age, their quiet vigil continues. To understand that vigil, the story of the Jedi must be stretched across the full canvas of galactic history, from starlight and legend to stone temples and burning empires. Power rises and falls. But what happens when that power is carried by an order that endures for thousands of years while governments crumble around it? The answer is the Jedi, standing as a thin, luminous thread through time. In the calendars of the Republic, events are measured relative to a single moment, the Battle of Yavin, when a hidden rebel base destroyed the first Death Star. Years before that event are marked as BBY, before the Battle of Yavin. Years after are ABY, after the Battle of Yavin. Around this single point, entire ages of the Jedi are arranged, distant and almost unreal, yet bound to that familiar A-center. Far back in the haze of prehistory, tens of thousands of years before the Battle of Yavin, the ancestors of the Jedi walked the storm-racked world of Tython. They were called the Jedi, and they believed not in strict denial of the dark side, but in holding light side and dark side in careful balance. On that world, in stone enclaves and wind-scoured valleys, They listened to the Force as it roared and whispered through violent weather and deep, quiet caverns. Over time, their experiments with balance and excess would shape everything that followed. Eventually, the Jedi fractured. Some clung to harmony, others reached too far into the dark. What followed was a series of schisms, exiles, and quiet reforms that slowly hardened into something new, the Jedi Order. By the time the Old Republic took shape, thousands of years before the Battle of Yavin, the Jedi had left Tython behind and sworn themselves to serve the wider galactic community, guided by a code that tried to tame passion and prevent another fall into shadow. During the long millennia of the Old Republic and its successor states, the Jedi were not only warriors in times of war, they were explorers, charting unknown hyperlanes, diplomats, resolving border disputes before they became open conflict, archivists, preserving cultures on worlds the Republic barely noticed. In tall libraries and remote outposts, they watched over feuds and famines with the same care they later gave to starfighter battles and sieges. Much later, in the High Republic era, only a few centuries BBY, the Jedi shone as radiant symbols of peace. They operated not just from the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, but from great stations such as Starlight Beacon, casting aid and reassurance into the Outer Rim. Yet even then, beneath their golden age, the dark side stirred. The rise of the Sith, the slow corruption of the Republic, and the march toward the Clone Wars formed a gathering storm that the Jedi felt but could not fully name. The popular memory often freezes them in that final, tragic moment before the fall, robed generals leading clone legions, lightsabers blazing across dusty worlds. Around 22 to 19 BBY, during the Clone Wars, they became commanders in a galactic conflict they had not started, trapped between duty to the Republic and a growing sense that something was terribly wrong. Order 66, the Great Jedi Purge, and the dark times that followed nearly erased them. Yet the timeline does not end there. In the quiet years ABY, scattered survivors hid as farmers, healers, wanderers. Luke Skywalker began to rebuild a new Jedi Order. Decades later, Rey would hear echoes of all those ages and carry them forward again. For the next 1,000 years and more, the idea of the Jedi would continue to flicker, refusing to vanish. Across this journey, their fate is bound to the rise of the Sith, the collapse of the Republic, and the endless cycle between light and dark. But in this telling, the focus will rest on the Jedi themselves, how their identity changed from storm-tossed mystics on Tython to serene archivists, from peacekeepers to reluctant generals, and finally to wandering sparks of renewal. This path will unfold slowly and clearly, one era at a time, as if walking through a vast temple corridor. Each chamber will open in turn. Ancient Jedi, Old Republic Guardians, High Republic Beacons, Clone Wars Commanders, Hunted Exiles, New Jedi. The details may blur into a gentle hum, but the shape of their long vigil will remain, guiding the next steps deeper into their earliest, half-forgotten beginnings. Those vast temple corridors lead backward beyond any Jedi archive into an era where there were no Jedi, no Sith, and no codes carved in stone. There were only scattered beings on distant worlds, feeling a presence in the dark between stars and giving it different names. Before the Order, there was only the first whisper of the Force, in the deep past of galactic history, long before Coruscant's shining spires or the clone. Wars, sensitive minds stirred on countless planets. On the misty plateaus of Ando Prime, shamans traced invisible currents in the air. On Dathomir, primitive witches bargained with unseen powers in the night. On worlds that would never be famous, hunters paused before a kill, sensing a warning, and heeded it without knowing why. These early cultures felt the same energy field that would one day guide Jedi starfighters, yet they had no single word for it, no unified tradition, only fragments. Over time, these fragments began to echo one another. Different species, separated by impossible distances, told stories of visions, of voices in dreams, of moments when the universe itself seemed to lean closer. Some saw this power as benevolent light, others as a dangerous dark tide, but none yet divided it into the moral absolutes the Jedi would later defend. The story of the Force in this era is the story of questions without answers, of patterns waiting for someone to connect them. Then, something answered. In the depths of the galactic core, colossal monoliths awoke, the Thoyor. They were vast, pyramidal starships, their surfaces covered in unreadable designs, their interiors humming with silent purpose. One by one, they appeared in the skies of distant worlds. Tython's future pilgrims on Ryloth, on Kashyyyk, on countless forgotten systems, hovering above deserts, jungles, and oceans. To those attuned to the Force, they were irresistible beacons. What followed was a quiet gathering on a scale the galaxy had never seen. The Thoyor did not conquer, they invited. Families watched as chosen children walked into their glowing chambers. Hermits, mystics, and warriors stepped aboard, drawn by a call they could not explain. This act of mercy would reshape galactic history, because instead of leaving each world alone in its confusion, the Thoyor brought their passengers together. They converged on Tython, a storm-racked world in the deep core, where the Force surged with unnatural intensity. What they found there would change everything. On Tython, the newcomers discovered that the energy they had all felt was one thing, not many. Its bright, gentle current they named Ashla. Its heavy, consuming undertow they named Bogan. Neither was condemned. Both were understood as necessary halves of a single whole, forever in tension. From this understanding emerged the Jedi. They were not yet Jedi, not yet guardians of a republic or generals in war. They were seekers of balance, wandering between Ashla and Bogan, exiling those who strayed too far to moons aligned with each aspect until equilibrium returned. Their temples ringed Tython's horizons, each devoted to a different discipline, martial focus, healing, philosophy, but all anchored in the same belief that to deny either the light side or the dark side was to deny the truth of the Force itself. For a time, this fragile harmony held. The Jedi meditated through Tython's storms, studied its volatile Force energies, and taught that passion and serenity, aggression and peace could coexist without inevitable corruption. Yet the planet's violent tempests hinted at a deeper danger. When the balance on Tython slipped, the very land convulsed. And as more beings arrived, as ambitions grew and philosophies hardened, the line between exploring the dark and being consumed by it began to blur. The Jedi believed they had mastered balance, but the Force on Tython had other lessons to teach. Their experiments, their failures, and the first great disaster that followed would shape everything the later Jedi Order became: its fear of the dark, its strict codes, its distant calm. In the next turning of this long history, storms on Tython would give birth to a new name, and with it, the first true schism between light and dark. On Tython, that first name took shape in stone, and Storm the Jedi. The story of the Jedi is the story of a world where the Force did not whisper. Silwit roared. Tython hung in the deep reaches of the galaxy, wrapped in pale clouds and crackling auroras, a place where the light side and dark side pushed against each other so fiercely that the land itself responded. When that balance shifted around those early days, the planet was never truly still. Winds rose from clear horizons without warning, spiraling into force storms that clawed at the sky. Distant mountains shuddered under gentle quakes. Rivers reversed their flow for a few quiet heartbeats, then settled again. When Ashla and Bogan, the bright and dark currents of the Force, fell out of harmony. Tython answered sometimes with violent weather, sometimes with an eerie crystalline calm that felt almost heavier than the storms on high plateaus. The Jedi carved their temples into the living rock, A Karkesh. The Temple of Balance stood at the center, its terraces stepping out over a vast chasm, where blue lightning traced patient patterns through the mist. Far above one horizon, glowed with the soft reflection of Ashla, the light moon. The other with the brooding shadow of Bogan. The dark here initiates, learn to feel both, without surrendering to either. In the distance, the temple of Ashla rose in pale stone. Open to the sun, its halls filled with warm light and quiet chanting on the far side of the world. The temple of Bogan crouched in darker cliffs, its chambers lit by low red crystals, humming with a heavier presence in those places. Jedi journeyers studied serenity and passion, restraint and raw power, moving between them under the guidance of masters who believed that to deny the dark side was to invite ignorance and future conflict before dawn. A single journeyer would wake in a simple stone cell at a Karkesh, stepping out into cold air. The sky still heavy with stars. They would walk to a narrow cliff where the chasm opened beneath their feet. There, the force storms turned slowly, far below, clouds turning in vast silent spirals. The journeyer would kneel, breathing in the charged air, letting Ashla and Bogan wash through their senses until the tremors in the rock faded into a steady rhythm. After meditation came travel, sometimes on foot, along worn paths, sometimes by slender craft gliding through thin morning mists. One day might be spent at Ashla studying healing arts, and the calm clarity of the light side the next, at Bogan confronting fear, anger, and the seductive rush of power. What followed was a lifelong practice of walking that narrow line, never fully surrendering to either pull. Yet this harmony had an edge. Those who leaned too far into darkness were not destroyed, but exiled, sent to the moon of Bogan to live under its shadow until balance returned over time. That punishment bred both humility and resentment, living so close to the dark side and insisting on mastering it, planted quiet seeds of pride and ambition, seeds that would shape every schism that followed, and in the distant future, for thousands of years of Jedi history, those early storms on Tython would still be felt. Those early storms on Tython would still be felt long after the first exiles returned from Bogan. But balance, once disturbed, rarely settles back into perfect stillness. What happens when a creed built on walking the edge begins to forget which side of the abyss it stands on? The answer is the fall of the Jedi. Over time, the punishment of exile twisted in meaning. For some Jedi, it was a lesson in humility. For others, it became a badge of hidden superiority. Those who endured Bogan's shadow began to whisper that the dark was not merely something to be balanced, but a deeper reservoir of power to be claimed. They argued that the light side and dark side were not equal currents, that the dark was more honest, more decisive, less constrained by compassion or restraint. Around this period, the Jedi councils on Tython grew increasingly divided. Meditations that had once been tranquil debates over nuance hardened into accusations. Entire temples leaned more toward Ashla, the light side, emphasizing serenity and self-control. Others drifted toward Bogan, embracing passion and raw will. This was still not yet the Sith nor the Jedi, but the story of a middle path collapsing under its own contradictions. What followed was a slow slide into open conflict. The Force itself began to react to the imbalanced storms of pure energy raged across Tython. Continents shook, as if the planet were protesting every arrogant attempt to bend the currents too far in one direction. At first, these were warnings. Then they became weapons. Jedi aligned with Ashla, and Jedi surrendered to Bogan, marshaled their followers, and the Force Wars began. The Force Wars were not a single battle, but a series of devastating campaigns across Tython cities that had once studied harmony, were reduced to glass, and ash temples, painstakingly carved into mountainsides, were shattered by earthquakes and force storms unleashed in desperate fury. The sky burned with auroras of light and dark clashing in the upper atmosphere. Entire orders of adepts vanished in moments when their rituals backfired, turning meditation halls into craters. In this calm retelling, it is easy to forget the scale of what happened yet. Tython itself was scarred. Oceans boiled along their shores. Forests were ripped from the ground and hurled across valleys. The Jedi, who sought mastery over balance, were nearly annihilated by the very energy field they had sworn to understand. For thousands of years later, Jedi historians would look back on this war as a quiet warning carved into the bedrock of their tradition. When the storms finally faded, the survivors stood among ruins. The cost of walking both light and dark, without limits, had become undeniable. In hushed conclaves, they reached a stark conclusion. True balance could no longer mean equal intimacy with Ashla and Bogan. Instead, it would mean centering the light side and holding the dark side at a distance, naming it corruption rather than counterpart. This decision would shape everything that followed. The Jedi name fell away, and from the wreckage, a more cautious tradition emerged. The Jedi Order, born on a world that had nearly died from imbalance, carried forward the memory of harmony, but wrapped it in stricter codes and renunciations for the next 1,000 years. And beyond, that new order would try to ensure that another Tython never happened again, even as the galaxy beyond Tython quietly waited for their return. In the quiet that followed the Force Wars, the survivors on Tython faced a simple question with impossible weight. If balance had led to such devastation, what path remained for those who still heard the Force calling them? The answer was the Jedi. In the years immediately after the cataclysm, the old Jedi name became a burden. It carried memories of temples shattered by storms and of masters who had walked too comfortably between light side and dark side disciplines. Those who endured the war chose to mark a break from that past. They shortened the ancient title, Jedi, to Jedi, a new word for an old calling meant to signal a clearer devotion to the light and a rejection of the practices that had nearly killed their world. What followed was not a sudden perfection, but a slow reshaping of belief over time. The first Jedi gathered in solemn councils among the scarred valleys of Tython. They spoke of what had been lost and what must never be repeated. From these debates emerged the earliest form of the Jedi Code, not yet the polished lines carved later into temple walls, but a guiding rhythm. Peace before passion, knowledge before impulse, serenity before anger, harmony before victory. Above all, they declared the dark side inherently corrupting a path that would always twist intention into tyranny. Around this same period, the Jedi reached another painful conclusion. Tython itself had become a wound in the Force. Constant storms and eruptions mirrored the turbulence in their own history. The planet that had birthed the Jedi had also mirrored. Their imbalance remaining there would trap the New Order in an endless echo of the war. And so the Jedi prepared starships and left their cradle behind, scattering to safer worlds in the wider galactic map. This departure marked a profound shift. No longer isolated mystics guarding a single sacred world, the Jedi began to imagine themselves as guardians and mediators, traveling between emerging Republic worlds, settling disputes before they became open conflict in small enclaves on distant planets. They taught children who were sensitive to the Force to listen for calm within chaos, to stand between factions rather than rule over them. Their power was meant to prevent war, not to win it. As their numbers grew, early council, like gatherings, formed circles of the most trusted Jedi who debated how strictly the code should be enforced. Some argued for minimal involvement in galactic politics. Others believed that to ignore rising darkness would be its own kind of failure. These quiet arguments would shape the Order for thousands of years. Even then, beneath the surface, another tension stirred. How much emotion could a Jedi safely hold? How close could attachment come to duty without becoming a chain? Some masters feared that any deep bond could open the door to the dark side. Others insisted that compassion without connection was hollow. Their disagreements remained contained, but their questions did not fade. The story of those questions waiting for an answer would echo into the age of the Republic and into the first true encounters with the Sith. Those questions about attachment and restraint did not vanish. They sank beneath the surface of the Order and met something new. The quiet hum of emerging technology, the The Jedi had once trusted simple force, imbued blades, metal forged, and then guided by will. But as the Republic advanced, so did the tools of the Jedi. The first proto-sabers appeared elegant in theory, but cumbersome in practice, their glowing blades tethered to external power packs. By thick energy cords around these early experiments, the story of the lightsaber began to take shape. Engineers and mystics worked side by side, asking how a weapon of pure energy could remain an instrument of peace. What followed was a long era of refinement, as unstable power cells gave way to compact emitters and containment fields. The breakthrough came with a different kind of discovery, not in a workshop, but in the quiet depths of the Force itself. The answer was the Kyber crystal to the early Jedi. These crystals were not mere fuel. They were living conduits, humming with a faint awareness, attuned to the light side of the Force, rather than strip-mining entire worlds. Jedi seekers underwent meditative journeys. Visions would pull them toward hidden caverns or frozen valleys, where Kyber sang beneath the stone, on worlds scattered across the galactic map. Ilum became the most sacred of these sites, its ice tunnels glowing with embedded crystals that responded to approaching initiates each. Crystal chose its bearer not through words, but through resonance and stillness. As the lightsaber matured, so did the places that housed its teachings. Over time, small enclaves and temples rose on worlds aligned with the Force Ossus, became a center of learning. Its terraces, lined with archives and quiet cloisters. Ilum remained a pilgrimage world, cold, silent, and luminous. Within other sanctuaries took root on remote moons and forest worlds. Each temple had its own character, some focused on martial training, others on healing or deep contemplation, yet all were bathed in soft, natural light, open to the sky or to the stars inside. These halls early, Jedi training unfolded at a measured pace. Initiates practiced slow, deliberate saber forms in echoing courtyards, their new Kyber-powered blades set to low intensity. The emphasis rested not on victory, but on control gardens served as classrooms as much as meditation spaces. Young Jedi traced the patterns of the wind and the flow of water to understand the Force, while ancient holocrons projected flickering masters from earlier ages. Serene teachers watched in silence, correcting a stance with a single gesture, or ending a duel with a quiet word. Beneath this calm, the memory of the Jedi's imbalance remained. The Order understood that the same power which ignited a lightsaber had once fueled dark empires and civil war to prevent another fall. They layered discipline into every ritual. Crystals were earned through trial forms, were bound to ethics. Temples were placed under councils rather than lone authorities. These choices would shape Jedi tradition for thousands of years and prepare the Order for its first true tests against the rising Sith. As the Jedi refined their rituals and bound power to discipline beyond their temples, the wider galaxy was changing for centuries. Fragmented star nations had risen and fallen, locked in cycles of war and uneasy truces. But exhaustion has its own gravity, and eventually worlds began to dream of something different, a shared order that might hold the chaos at bay. This dream took form in the early Galactic Republic, a fragile alliance born not from conquest but from negotiation. Its founders envisioned common law, open trade, and mutual defense. Yet beneath the polished language of charters and senatorial oaths lay a simple truth. The Republic was young, vulnerable, and surrounded by old grudges, ready to ignite at the slightest spark. In that uncertain dawn, the story of the Jedi shifted. Until then, they had been guardians of knowledge and local peacekeepers scattered across key worlds. Now a question emerged: who would stand between rival systems when treaties failed? Who could move above planetary loyalties and speak with a voice trusted across the stars? The quiet answer was the Jedi over time. The Order's reputation for calm judgment drew the attention of Republic envoys. At first, the connection was informal. A council here asking for a negotiator, a small delegation there requesting a neutral escort. What followed was a gradual weaving of Jedi presence into the Republic's daily life, while remaining technically independent. The Order became its unofficial shield, and Conscient's early missions reflected this new role. A pair of Jedi might travel to border worlds where mining guilds and local governments argued over hyperspace lanes. Another team would escort a vulnerable diplomat through regions still haunted by pirate fleets. Sometimes the work was almost invisible. A single Jedi mediating a water dispute on an arid colony, preventing hunger from becoming rebellion and rebellion from becoming war. These quiet interventions would shape galactic history more than most senators realized. Each resolved conflict meant one less excuse for militaries to mobilize, one more reason for distant worlds to trust the Republic. Jedi healers tended refugees after planetary disasters, while scholars advised on fair legal codes, echoing the Order's belief that justice flowed from harmony with the Force, rather than from fear for the Jedi. This partnership carried its own reward. The Republic offered a wider stage on which their ideals of service and protection could unfold. Ancient meditation techniques found new purpose in council chambers. Battle-tested lightsaber forms became symbols of reassurance instead of intimidation. In remote sectors, the sight of a simple brown robe often did more to calm tensions than entire fleets. Yet beneath this mutual benefit, a subtle tension grew. The closer the Jedi moved to the heart of galactic power, the more their days revolved around senatorial schedules, trade disputes, and political crises. Could an order born from contemplation remain untouched while orbiting a capital world built on ambition and compromise? And if unseen enemies ever learned to twist that closeness, what they found there would change everything in a perfect vision of the Jedi Order. Every mind would move in harmony. Every voice would echo the same understanding of the Force. But what happens when an order devoted to peace cannot agree on what peace demands? The answer is the first schisms, quiet fractures inside the Jedi, long before open war with the dark side. In the centuries after their move to Coruscant, the Jedi Code was still being refined. The story of the Order in this era is not only one of battles and treaties, but of arguments in candlelit halls. Some masters believed the Jedi existed to intervene boldly, to end suffering wherever it appeared. If a planetary ruler oppressed a population, they argued that the Force itself compelled action. Others insisted that attachment to outcomes was a path to the dark, and that the Jedi should remain healers, mediators, and scholars, stepping into galactic politics only when absolutely necessary. Over time, these disagreements crystallized around a single question. How much power should a Jedi truly wield? Some knights on the Outer Rim saw worlds abandoned by the Republic and concluded that only decisive action could prevent endless conflict. They experimented with advanced battle meditation, amplifying allied fleets and armies through the Force, turning the tide of war without firing a single shot. More controversial still were those who studied ancient Jedi records from Tython texts that spoke of balancing light side and dark side rather than rejecting darkness outright. What followed was a slow, unsettling shift. A minority within the Order argued that understanding the dark side was necessary to defeat it, that by studying forbidden techniques, they could anticipate and counter future Sith threats in hidden archives on Ossus and within sealed vaults beneath the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. Certain masters examined holocrons that pulsed with a colder presence. They experimented with aggressive Force techniques, kinetic blasts that shattered stone, and mental assaults that could rip secrets from an enemy mind. Officially, these practices were condemned. Councils convened great assemblies where elder Jedi recited the emerging code. There is no emotion. There is peace. There is no passion. There is serenity. Through calm debate, some disputes were resolved. Doctrines, clarified lines, drawn a few ambitious proposals for Jedi-led military coalitions were quietly shelved. Other disagreements were never fully addressed. They simply drifted beneath the surface, remembered by those who felt their warnings had been ignored. Then came the pattern no one expected. Not a single dramatic rebellion at first, but individual Jedi quietly stepping away. One knight leaving after being censured for using battle meditation to sway a planetary election. Another exiled for refusing to abandon research into dark side artifacts. Each carried with them fragments of forbidden knowledge and a conviction that the mainstream order had grown timid. For the next 1,000 years, these unresolved tensions would shape the Jedi. Whenever crisis struck, interventionists and isolationists argued anew, and those who had tasted the edge of darkness remembered its power. Eventually, some would not merely walk away, they would be cast out in numbers, exiles whose anger and ambition would seek a new home, and what they found there would change everything. The dark temptation, the first dark Jedi and forbidden paths cast out in growing numbers, these former Jedi carried something far more dangerous than anger. They carried training knowledge and a sense of betrayal that ran deeper than any wound the Order had faced internal dissent before. But this was different. These were not ignorant warlords or untrained mystics. They were fully formed Jedi, turning that same discipline toward the dark side. In the centuries that followed, a new term began to take shape in hushed council debates and guarded reports. Dark Jedi, not yet Sith, not bound to any great dark empire, but fallen all the same. They were defined by one simple truth. They had once sworn the code, and now used the Force for domination, personal gain, or unrestrained experimentation. Their story was not about ignorance. It was about refusal. Some of the earliest Dark Jedi were powerful, charismatic figures who questioned the code's severe restrictions on emotion and attachment. They asked why compassion must be distant, why love must be surrendered, why fear could never be wielded as a tool. One argued that a healer who truly loved a world would fight more fiercely to defend it. Another claimed that criminals could be deterred forever if they learned to fear the Jedi. These questions were not shouted in rage. They were whispered in meditation halls and archives around these voices. Gathered students who had seen too much war, too much galactic suffering. They began to believe that the light side alone was insufficient, that only by mastering the full spectrum of the Force, including its darkest currents, could the Order truly protect the Republic. What followed was a slow, quiet descent. They experimented with battle meditation sharpened by anger they probed. Ancient Jedi texts that once spoke of balance between light and dark, and they convinced themselves that intention would keep them pure. Over time, the Force answered them, not with clarity, but with power. Anger made their strikes surer. Pride made their commands irresistible fear in their enemies, ended conflicts quickly. And so the Dark Jedi told themselves they were saving lives, yet each victory demanded a little more control, a little more surrender to the dark side, until the line between protection and domination blurred beyond recognition. The Jedi Council's first response was mercy. They summoned these wayward knights to Coruscant, to the great temple built over an ancient Sith shrine, and tried to reason with them. Elders offered rehabilitation, meditation retreats, even temporary withdrawal from duty. This act of mercy would reshape galactic history because it convinced some Dark Jedi that the Order was weak, unwilling to do what was necessary. When the galaxy bled, when persuasion failed, the Council turned to censure, then exile in rare cases to armed confrontation blades met in forgotten corridors and on distant moons where records would later speak only of accidents and disappearances. The Order told itself that firm boundaries would end the threat, yet each exile carried away bitterness and secret techniques that would shape conflicts yet to come. In truth, these early Dark Jedi were warnings. The Order never fully heeded their fall, suggested that the Jedi approach to emotion and attachment might be forging the very monsters it feared. Instead of healing them and somewhere beyond known space, the first great gathering of exiles moved toward a world called Korriban. What they found there would change everything. The Great Hyperspace War, Jedi, Sith, and the First Great Clash cast into the unknown regions of space. The exiles drifted toward Korriban, and what they found there would change everything. The world was steeped in the dark side, its red sands and looming. Tombs home to the ancient Sith species, primitive in technology, yet powerful in their own sinister traditions. The story of these exiles did not end in repentance or obscurity. They conquered the Sith people interbred with them, and over time forged a new culture, entirely under Ajunta Pal and those who followed him. This hybrid civilization became the first true Sith Empire power. It was not a temptation to be resisted, but the highest virtue conflict was sacred. The strong ruled the weak, and the Force was a weapon to bend others to their will. For the next 1,000 years, this hidden empire grew in the shadows of the galactic rim far from the Republic and beyond the gaze of the Jedi. They raised obsidian temples on Korriban and Ziost, carved their dogma into stone, and trained armies of Sith warriors and sorcerers. While the Republic enjoyed relative peace, the Sith perfected war in isolation. Their greatest Dark Lords, from Tulak Horde to Marka Ragnos, turned dueling and ritual into an art form. What followed was a long, silent ascent, an empire sharpening its blade in the dark, around 5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. That silence finally broke. A pair of Republic explorers, Gav and Jory Darrigan, miscalculated a hyperspace jump and stumbled into Sith space. Their arrival exposed the wider galaxy to the Sith and exposed the Sith to a new field of conquest. Naga. Sado, a bold and ambitious Sith Lord, saw opportunity where others saw only danger through deception. Sado seized power and launched the Great Hyperspace War, using illusions and battle meditation to multiply his fleets and sow terror. He hurled Sith armadas into Republic space, striking worlds such as Coruscant and Kirek. The war spread quickly. Hyperspace lanes, once used for trade, now carried invasion forces. The Republic faced an enemy it had not known existed. The Jedi moved to meet this threat. They coordinated with Republic admirals to defend key systems, boarded Sith flagships in brutal close combat, and confronted Dark Lords in duels that lit ruined skylines with clashing blades of light and crimson on battlefields. From Primus Golud to Korribin, they acted as General's guardians and investigators, tracking Sith infiltrators and unraveling Sado's illusions. Psychologically, the cost was immense for the Jedi. This enemy was not an alien mystery, but a mirror. The teachings of the Order, twisted into a creed of domination and hatred. Every fallen Sith Lord was a reminder that the line between light side and dark side ran through the heart of every Jedi Knight. Their councils grew more cautious, their codes more restrictive, haunted by what these exiles had become. In the end, betrayal within the Sith ranks and united Republic counterattacks shattered Sado's campaign. The Empire retreated its strongholds, bombarded its fleets, broken the Republic, and the Jedi emerged victorious. But the memory of the Sith would shape Jedi doctrine for thousands of years. Their fear of another hidden empire would guide choices, great and terrible. And in the distant darkness beyond known space, not all Sith were truly gone. After the fire, the Jedi Code. Hardens in the uneasy calm after the Great Hyperspace War. The Jedi Order turned inward. The Sith Empire had been beaten back, but victory brought little comfort. Too many Jedi had fallen. Too many temples burned. The question haunted their meditations. How had guardians of the light side slipped so easily into darkness? The answer they sought would shape everything that followed. Over the next centuries, councils gathered on Ossus Coruscant and distant enclaves. Masters compared records of the Great Sith War, the 100-year darkness, and older schisms stretching back to Tython patterns emerged again and again. It was rarely sudden corruption. Instead, it began with wounded pride, unhealed grief, and fear of losing those held most dear. What followed was a slow drift from service to self, from compassion to control. In response, the Jedi refined their teachings into something sharper and more absolute. The story of the modern Jedi Code begins here. There is no emotion. There is peace. There is no ignorance. There is knowledge. There is no passion. There is serenity. There is no chaos. There is harmony. There is no death. There is the Force. These lines did not appear all at once. They were debated, revised, and recited in council halls scarred by war. Each phrase a reaction to centuries of pain, betrayal, and the memory of Sith armies rising from former Jedi ranks over time. Rules around attachment hardened. What began as advice against possessiveness became formal prohibition against romance, and family masters argued that personal bonds could twist into fear of loss, and that fear could open a path to the dark side. Examples from their own history seem to prove the point. Dark Jedi who had sacrificed worlds to save a single loved one, knights who had abandoned entire sectors in pursuit of vengeance, The Jedi chose to cut the root rather than prune the branches. Knowledge itself became dangerous ground after the devastation wrought by Sith sorcery and rituals that drained entire worlds. The Order locked away many holocrons in heavily warded vaults on Ossus and later beneath the Jedi Temple, on Coruscant scrolls on battle meditation. Thought probes and aggressive force techniques were sealed or declared forbidden. Some texts were not destroyed, but buried in archives that only the highest counselors could access. What they found there would change everything if mishandled, so the safest path seemed to be silence. Yet in corridors and meditation gardens, doubts lingered. Could an Order sworn to understand the Force afford to blind itself to vast portions of its own history? Some Jedi quietly feared that in fleeing the dark, they were also fleeing parts of ordinary life. Love, family, deep grief that might have made them more compassionate and flexible. This tension between protection and openness would echo for thousands of years, and in a later age when the Republic reached its shining height, the consequences of this hardened code would emerge in unexpected ways. Temples among the stars, daily life in the old Republic, Jedi Order in that tension between protection and openness. The Jedi of the old Republic built their daily lives not on constant battlefields, but in temples that rose above the noise of galactic traffic. Each morning on Coruscant, the great Jedi Temple greeted the dawn, its spires catching the first pale light, as the city below still shimmered with the fading glow of night traffic. The Force there felt quiet and awake at the same time. Inside the halls, the day began gently. The soft hum of training remotes floated from practice chambers as younglings traced careful arcs with low-powered sabers. In the distance, the archives whispered with activity, hollow recordings cycling through ancient history, while archivist droids glided between towering stacks. Meditation rooms opened toward the sunrise and warm shafts of light filtered through high windows, turning dust motes into slow, drifting stars. In one of those rooms, a young Padawan rose before the rest of the city. Fully stirred, the story of that Padawan's day would shape more than their own future. It reflected the rhythm that guided the entire Order, seated cross-legged in a sunlit chamber. They slowed their breathing, feeling the faint vibration of repulsor lift traffic miles below, and the deeper current of the Force beneath everything. This quiet ritual anchored the hours that followed. After meditation came movement in the training cells. Rows of Padawans practiced basic saber forms under the watchful gaze of instructors, feet sliding in precise patterns, blades rising and falling in unhurried sequences. The goal was not spectacle, but control, a reminder that power without discipline led back toward the dark side. Nearby, their master observed occasionally stepping in to adjust a stance or offer a calm correction over time. These small refinements forged reflexes that would one day matter in moments of real conflict later. The same Padawan sat in the archives beside their master, listening as ancient holocrons recounted battles with Sith empires and debates over the nature of the light side history and philosophy were treated as equally important to combat. The master's voice stayed patient, explaining why the council had chosen certain paths and where past arrogance had brought the Order close to ruin. Above them, the Jedi Council deliberated in a circular chamber, 12 seats overseeing not an empire, but a duty ranks flowed upward from youngling to Padawan Knight, and finally, Master. Yet in the quiet of the temple hierarchy felt less about status and more about responsibility beyond Coruscant. Other temples and remote enclaves dotted the Republic from desert worlds to forest moons. Each, a small lighthouse in the larger galactic sea service, defined the spaces between wars in med-centers. Jedi healers guided the Force through shattered bones and failing organs on distant worlds. Diplomats mediated trade disputes long before they became open conflict. And in forgotten sectors, Jedi watchmen lived almost anonymously, watching for unrest and easing tensions with a word rather than a blade for thousands of years. What followed was not endless war, but a steady pattern of study meditation and small compassionate acts. This was the hidden foundation beneath the dramatic events that history remembers. and as the Republic's golden age advanced, that quiet rhythm within the temples would soon meet challenges no meditation hall could fully prepare them for. Shadows in the archives, lost knowledge, and quiet doubts. Yet even in that calm, a quieter tension grew in the heart of the Order. A question of how much could truly be known, and how much should be hidden at the center of the Jedi Temple. On Coruscant stood the archives, a vast, serene labyrinth of knowledge that for thousands of years had been the pride of the Jedi around towering shelves and softly humming holoprojectors. The story of the Jedi unfolded in endless layers. There were star charts mapping hyperlanes from the core to the distant outer rim records of ancient missions on Tython and beyond, and treatises on the light side, written by contemplative masters whose names had long since faded from public memory. Holocrons glowed gently in secured vaults, each one a captured voice from another age, offering lessons on the Force discipline and restraint. This was not a chaotic library, but a carefully curated memory of the Order's past. Every volume and crystal had been selected over time by generations of scholarly Jedi librarians. Figures such as Jocasta Nu, in the final days of the Republic, stood in a long tradition of archivists who believed that clarity of knowledge would shape clarity of action. The archives were treated almost as a second temple, a place where conflict was dissected and diffused into calm historical record, yet buried within this near endless repository were shelves most Jedi never saw, restricted sections sealed by authorization codes, and guarded not by soldiers, but by silence there. The Order stored Sith Lord dark rituals and grim accounts of Jedi who had fallen to the dark side, their names and deeds preserved, yet carefully walled off from curious Padawans. Only a handful of masters and archivists were permitted to consult these records, often under the supervision of the Council itself. Some within the archives began to wonder whether this secrecy was truly protection or a quiet vulnerability. What happened when a Padawan encountered a Sith artifact or a dark presence without ever having studied the temptations it brought? A few librarians whispered that shielding younger Jedi from the shadow might leave them unprepared when the shadow finally reached for them. Their doubts were seldom voiced in open council, but they lingered in late-night cataloging sessions and private research requests that went unanswered. Alongside forbidden histories, another kind of uncertainty rested on the shelves. Collections of prophecies and recorded visions from seers stretching back to the Jedi on Tython. Among them were early whispers of a chosen one who would bring balance to the Force. The wording was fragmented, the interpretations endlessly debated. Some masters treated these lines as sacred, others dismissed them as poetic exaggerations from more mystical eras over the next 1,000 years. Such predictions were carefully filed but rarely allowed to guide policy. The Council came to trust its procedures, its codes, and its bureaucracy more than the unruly flow of visions. In doing so, the Jedi leaned ever more heavily on their own systems, and ever less on the living, unpredictable will of the Force itself. And as the Republic's shine grew brighter in the galactic core, faint cracks in that certainty were already beginning to form. The High Republic, an age of light and outreach, those cracks in certainty would widen when the Jedi reached for the stars themselves. Peace had always been their promise. But what happens when peace is carried not by armies of soldiers, but by wandering monks in ships of light? The answer is the High Republic, set roughly 2 centuries before the Skywalker saga. This was the age many later historians would quietly envy. The Jedi were numerous, confident, and deeply trusted across the galactic map. Their temple on Coruscant stood in serene command, but its influence flowed outward through a web of outposts and great stations. This was not yet an order overshadowed by war. It was an order that believed the light side could reach every forgotten corner of space. At the heart of this vision stood Starlight Beacon, a colossal space station in the outer rim, suspended against the dark. It was part lighthouse, part hospital, part diplomatic forum, transmitting signals and aid into regions where the Republic's presence had been little more than a rumor. What followed was a deliberate effort to turn distant frontiers into genuine communities, ships in distress, homesteads struck by disaster, and worlds hit by cosmic storms all looked to that shining structure as a promise that help would come around Starlight. And stations like it, the Jedi organized themselves in smaller, flexible groups rather than massed battalions. Each team adapted to local customs and expectations. Some wore more practical robes or armor to blend with frontier life. Others learned regional languages and rituals. The story of the High Republic Jedi was not one of conquest, but of cultivation. They spoke of themselves as gardeners of peace, tending to fragile shoots of trust instead of enforcing order at the edge of a blaster on countless worlds. This philosophy became vivid and strangely beautiful on one frontier planet. A Jedi marshal might ride the back of a massive native beast across open grasslands, its hooves drumming through the Force as she answered a distress call on another two Jedi. Would spend days mediating a water dispute between rival settlements, seated in simple tents rather than grand halls nearby. Republic officials worked alongside them, not above them, sharing food and labor as they rebuilt damaged towns. In those years, the line between government and guardian blurred into partnership. Over time, these efforts would shape how the Outer Rim understood the Republic, not as a distant empire, but as a network of neighbors and watchful protectors. Even so, the galaxy was never entirely gentle. Beyond the reach of Starlight's signal gathered the Nihil Marauders, anarchic raiders who turned hyperspace itself into a weapon. Their sudden strikes tore through shipping lanes and frontier systems, exposing how fragile that golden calm truly was. In the shadows of unexplored regions, strange dark side disturbances flickered rumors of dead worlds that whispered through the Force, and artifacts that twisted the minds of those who found them hinted that an older menace was only sleeping and on the horizon of this bright age. Events were already aligning that would test the Jedi's faith in ways they could not yet imagine. Cracks in the light, fear, disaster, and subtle shifts in that uneasy stillness at the edge of the High Republic's golden light. The first fractures appeared not as open war, but as accidents and anomalies. Hyperspace itself began to misbehave. Ships vanished from carefully plotted lanes or tore apart mid-jump, as if some unseen hand had twisted the currents of the Force. What followed was a chain of disasters that turned confidence into quiet dread. Around this time, the galaxy watched in horror as a single freighter's destruction sent shrapnel hurtling through hyperspace, emerging at random points to devastate peaceful worlds. One moment, a tranquil agrarian moon. The next, a storm of burning metal. Crossing its skies, the Jedi raced to respond, but for the first time in generations, their speed and insight were not enough. Whole families were lost before any warning could be sent, and the Order felt that failure echoed through the Force in the Outer Rim. Great symbols of hope also came under threat. Installations such as the Starlight Beacon had been built as lighthouses of the light side, intended to guide travelers and project aid into regions long neglected by the core. Yet these shining stations drew the attention of marauders, extremists, and stranger forces. Still, attacks on these hubs of relief and diplomacy forced the Jedi to stand not as wandering monks, but as defenders, holding a line they had never expected to draw beneath these visible crises. Subtler shadows moved dark side disturbances, coiled around ancient artifacts recovered from forgotten worlds. A serene knight might touch a relic and feel a surge of anger that was not their own, or hear whispers promising the power to prevent the next tragedy. What they found there would change everything, not through a single revelation, but through a slow corrosion of certainty. The story of the High Republic became entangled with doubts the Jedi had long kept at bay in the high chambers of the Jedi Council. The response unfolded in calm, measured debates. Masters sat in quiet circles, voices low as they asked whether the Order should remain open-handed or build stronger defenses. Some argued for more centralized control over missions and hyperspace routes, closer coordination with the Republic's growing institutions, and permanent Jedi detachments at key galactic installations. Others warned that such steps would shape the Order into something more rigid, more entangled with politics and fear for individual Jedi. The strain was deeply personal. A knight who had watched a world burn from a hyperspace emergence might dream of those flames. For years, attachment was forbidden, yet grief arrived uninvited. A master might hold the hand of a dying colonist and feel the impulse to promise that such loss would never happen again. The code said to release that fear. The heart whispered to hold it. and never forget over time that tension carved quiet scars. This act of mercy would reshape galactic history, not in a single dramatic moment, but through countless small choices. Jedi remained longer on troubled worlds, accepted advisory roles in regional governments, and allowed Republic security forces to plan around their presence. As the Republic itself grew more complex and bureaucratic, the Order's place shifted almost imperceptibly from roaming guardians of the Force toward instruments of state power. And in that slow drift, the seeds of a far darker future were quietly sown. Between wars, the Jedi, as quiet stewards of the Republic, in the centuries that followed the great frontier pushes of the High Republic, the galaxy entered a quieter rhythm. The Jedi Order did not vanish from history, but their battles grew smaller, their victories less dramatic. Instead of grand campaigns against Sith empires or roving marauder fleets, most days were spent in council. Chambers, mediation halls, and modest transports, slipping in and out of troubled systems almost unnoticed. This was peace. But it was not emptiness. Around this time, the work of the Jedi became increasingly administrative, and precise disputes over hyperspace lanes, between merchant guilds, border conflicts between neighboring worlds, and succession crises within planetary dynasties filled their schedules. A pair of Jedi might arrive on a world not to wage war, but to listen to grievances, draft compromises, and quietly nudge leaders away from open conflict. On another day, a knight might intervene in a village feud, disarming not armies, but tempers and the story of the Order. In this age was written in these small, invisible corrections over time. That quieter mission reshaped the Order itself. Training, which had once been spread across various temples and outposts, drew steadily toward the shining heart of the Republic on Coruscant, the great Jedi temple. There rose higher and grew denser its towers, expanded its archives, deepened its halls, filled with initiates and Padawans brought from across the galactic disk. What followed was a subtle centralization. Younglings no longer learned amid the shifting winds of remote enclaves, but under the steady glow of temple lamps in carefully ordered classes within those walls. The Jedi code hardened from a flexible set of teachings into a standardized creed. There is no emotion. There is peace was repeated in training rooms, meditation chambers, and quiet dormitories until it became the default answer to almost every inner conflict, more unorthodox. Jedi paths, wandering philosophers, mystic seers, or balance-seeking traditions echoing the ancient Jedi on Tython slowly faded into the margins. They were not outlawed outright, but they were no longer the norm. The center of gravity had moved, and the Order followed the temple itself, reflected this transformation. Its grand halls once echoing, and contemplative grew busier and more formal-robed figures. Moved with purpose from briefing rooms to hangar bays, from the archives to the council spires, the High Council chamber rarely sat empty as masters rotated through endless sessions, debating appointments, border incidents, and subtle shifts in the Force. An endless tide of petitions and reports flowed through the building, binding the Jedi ever more tightly to the machinery of the Republic. Still, not every Jedi remained in that orbit. Some accepted posts as planetary watchmen stationed on remote worlds where their presence alone discouraged corruption and open violence. Others vanished into scholarly enclaves, poring over ancient holocrons and star charts on forgotten library worlds. Yet even these outliers, reported back to Coruscant, took their cues from central directives and measured their actions against the increasingly rigid code. The Order's soul was now anchored firmly above the Republic's capital. In that stability, a quiet dependency grew almost unnoticed. The Jedi had become guardians of a galactic order. They no longer imagined failing their confidence in the Republic's institutions and in their own procedures made them powerful but also vulnerable. For the next 1,000 years, they refined their methods, trusting that peace could be managed indefinitely. And in that trust, a clever enemy would find space to move in the shadows, preparing a future in which the temple's shining towers would no longer guarantee safety. The Phantom returned. Sith in the shadows, Jedi in the light. In the quiet centuries that followed the last great Sith Wars, the Jedi Temple on Coruscant stood not only as a monument to peace, but as proof of a belief the Order held with absolute certainty: the Sith were gone. Their empires broken their banners, torn down and their secrets scattered to forgotten tombs and dust-choked worlds in the archives, this was treated as settled history, an ancient nightmare that had burned itself out. The story of the Sith in this era, however, did not end in fire. It retreated into shadow while the Jedi catalogued relics and sealed holocrons. The surviving Sith embraced a new doctrine, the rule of two. One master and one apprentice. No armies, no open empire, only patience, and the slow, careful accumulation of power over time. This hidden lineage moved through the galactic undercurrent, watching, studying, waiting. The Jedi believed their vigilance and their libraries would shape any future threat before it could grow dangerous. Their seers meditated in high spires, confident that any great disturbance in the Force would be felt long before it reached the Republic's heartworlds. The Council pointed to the absence of open dark side war as proof that the Sith were truly extinct, that whatever embers remained were only scattered cults and unstable warlords. Meanwhile, in the Senate chambers below the Temple's foundations, the Sith began to weave a different kind of conflict. There were no fleets bearing crimson insignia, only amendments to trade laws, quiet appointments to key committees and subtle manipulations of crisis after crisis under the rule of two. Each generation of Sith apprenticed itself not to a battlefield, but to the machinery of the Republic itself. What followed was an infiltration so gradual that even the most sensitive Jedi senses barely stirred. The irony ran deep, for the Jedi Temple had been raised over an ancient Sith shrine, its foundations resting on a wound in the Force that had pulsed since the earliest empires. Yet the Order's faith in its own clarity dulled the warning. This was the same Order that once walked the balance on Tython, that had survived for thousands of years by questioning its own understanding. Now it trusted procedure and precedent more than unease. When at last hints of Sith activity surfaced again, in the prequel era, the Council's reaction revealed this tension. Reports of a mysterious warrior wielding a red blade were met with cautious concern, but also with disbelief, as if the very word Sith belonged only in history, lectures and sealed holocrons. Could an enemy thought dead for a millennium truly have returned? The Council debated, they searched the archives, they weighed prophecy against protocol, and in their measured skepticism lay the opening their enemy had prepared for the next 1,000 years. The Sith had studied Jedi habits, their pride, their attachment to the Republic, and had learned exactly how to move just beyond their notice. The first open clash would not be a war of empires, but a single duel on a distant world, and the outcome of that encounter would hint at a far darker design still waiting to be revealed. A temple above a wound, Coruscant's hidden darkness. The first open clash would not be a war of empires, but a single duel on a distant world, yet far away from that isolated confrontation. Another battleground had already been chosen, not in open space or on some forgotten frontier, but at the very heart of the Galactic Republic, on Coruscant itself rising. Above the endless cityscape, the Jedi Temple stood as a serene island of order and calm. Its 5 great spires reached upward in quiet defiance of the crowded towers around it. Within those walls, the hum of life was steady and measured. Training sabers whispered through practice halls. Meditation chambers glowed softly with filtered daylight, and the low murmur of voices in the archives blended with the gentle thrum of distant traffic. There, the story of the Jedi felt stable and unshakable. Archivists moved between towering shelves of holocrons and data stacks, preserving thousands of years of history in the central spire. Masters guided younglings through breathing exercises, teaching them to listen to the Force healers, tended to the wounded in quiet bays, while high above observation decks opened onto the stars, giving contemplative Jedi a place to reflect on conflicts unfolding across the galaxy. From a distance, it appeared to be a pure beacon of the light side, but beneath its polished floors and echoing halls lay something far older, long before the Republic raised its shining towers. An ancient Sith shrine had stood on that very ground there. The dark side had been drawn and focused through rituals now half forgotten. Its chambers once resonated With whispered invocations and the cold geometry of Sith power over time, those rituals faded, the structure was buried, foundations were laid, and the Jedi temple rose above the wound. Yet the Force remembers places, even when stone is moved and names are lost. A subtle imprint remained, a quiet dissonance beneath the harmony of the temple's presence in the Force. Most Jedi never noticed it at all to them. The temple felt familiar, comforting, inevitable, but the imprint was there, a faint veil over perception, a soft distortion at the very center of their order. What followed was not a dramatic curse or obvious corruption. Instead, it was a gradual narrowing of vision, a slight difficulty in sensing threats that moved in the same corridors of power. The Jedi themselves now walked, especially within the Senate and Chancellor's office, only a short flight from the temple's landing platforms. The symbolism was almost too precise, an order of light unknowingly rooted in a place once dedicated to the dark. Their confidence rested on foundations they did not fully understand. For the next 1,000 years, Jedi spoke of clarity and detachment, while a buried history pulsed faintly beneath their feet, a reminder that the Force does not divide itself as neatly as codes and councils suggest. Was this a trap laid by the Sith, or a quiet lesson woven into the nature of the Force itself? The answer was more complicated than simple design or simple accident. It hinted at a deeper truth. Light and dark were not distant continents, but opposing currents in the same vast ocean. And even the wisest among the Jedi could overlook how closely those currents flowed together. In time, this unseen tension within the temple would shape how the Jedi responded, to new threats from the Outer Rim and to a rising figure in galactic politics whose presence the Order sensed dimly. If at all, the calm halls of Coruscant's temple seemed secure, yet just beyond their perception, a different kind of storm was beginning to gather. The Chosen One. Question, prophecy, hope, and misreading the Force. Yet beneath that gathering storm, the Jedi held to something older than any Republic charter, an ancient whisper preserved in stone, and Datapat, a prophecy that spoke of balance in the Force, and of one who would bring it. The story of this prophecy reached back to forgotten seers and lost worlds, yet its words endured in the Jedi archives, copied and recopied by generations who no longer remembered the first voice that had spoken them over time. Scholars of the Order debated its meaning. Some argued that balance meant the end of the dark side itself. Others insisted it meant a restored equilibrium between light side and dark side currents in the galactic tapestry. The exact wording was fragmentary, prone to interpretation, and that was the danger the Jedi knew, that visions could mislead, that the Force showed possibilities, not certainties. So the Council approached such texts with ritual caution, treating them as warnings more than promises, and yet the idea of a chosen one lingered even in those careful halls for thousands of years. Jedi Masters walked past the sealed holocrons where the prophecy was stored. Some consulted it in quiet meditation. Emerging unsettled, others avoided it entirely, fearing that expectation would shape perception and bend judgment. The Council taught that attachment to outcomes was perilous, but expectation itself could become a subtle attachment around the final decades of the Republic. This old whisper met a living child on the desert world of Tatooine, a boy named Anakin Skywalker with a connection to the Force, beyond recorded precedent, born to a mother who spoke of no father. The circumstances struck many as uncanny echoes of half-remembered lines from the archives. Qui-Gon Jinn, a Jedi Master already known for following the living Force more than rigid doctrine, became convinced that what he had found there would change everything. Before the Council on Coruscant, the boy stood small beneath towering columns, while instruments confirmed what intuition already suspected: his potential was immense. Yet beneath that power, the Masters sensed currents of fear and fierce attachment to his mother. Some on the Council heard in those emotions the seeds of future darkness. Others heard in his raw compassion the possibility of a great guardian who might heal a galaxy sliding toward war. What followed was a quiet but profound division within the Order, not open schism, but a difference in emphasis. Some Masters argued that admitting Anakin out of deference to prophecy was reckless, that the Council should not allow an uncertain text to override clear warnings in the present. Others believed that to turn him away would be more dangerous, still leaving a Force prodigy untrained in a galaxy where the Sith might yet endure in shadow. Over time, Anakin became less a boy in their eyes and more an answer to questions the Order had been asking for centuries, a symbol of hope or of dread, depending on who watched him. This subtle shift would shape how they guided him and how they failed him, seeing the chosen one more than the person that made it harder to hear his fears, and harder still to notice how another presence in galactic politics was already moving to claim him in the years ahead. That same prophecy would return again and again in council debates and private doubts, a thread binding Anakin's fate to the wider fall of the Republic and to the dark resurgence waiting just beyond the Temple's sight. War comes to the Temple. The Jedi enter. The Clone Wars in the shadows of the Temple. Those unanswered doubts did not have long to linger. The galactic crisis that had simmered for years finally boiled over when open. Conflict erupted between the Republic and the Separatist Alliance. What began as political deadlock became full-scale war engineered in secret by a Sith Lord who held the Chancellorship itself. The Clone Wars had begun, and what followed was a transformation of the Jedi Order more profound than any in recent history. On Geonosis, the first battle shattered the illusion that the Jedi could remain distant from galactic power. Thousands of clone troopers marched under the banner of the Republic against endless ranks of droids commanded by the Separatists in that dust-choked arena. Jedi who had trained for serenity and precise intervention suddenly found themselves in chaotic melee, surrounded by blaster fire and collapsing structures. It was the moment the Order crossed an invisible threshold from guardians to combatants. In the days that followed, the Council faced a choice that cut to the heart of their identity. Power corrupts. But what happens when that power is military command placed in the hands of monks sworn to peace? The answer was the story of the Jedi as generals in a war they had not chosen gathered in their circular chamber. Masters, Yoda Mace, Windu, Ki-Adi Mundi, Plo Koon, and others weighed the cost. Some argued that refusing to fight would abandon billions to tyranny. Others warned that leading armies would pull the Order toward the very attachment to institutions and outcomes the Code tried to restrain. Yet the Republic appeared to stand on the brink of collapse, and the dark side clouded every attempt to see an alternative, believing the Republic faced an existential threat, and trusting the Force to guide them. The Council accepted command of the clone legions. They did so with visible reluctance, but the decision would shape everything that followed. For the next 1,000 years, historians would point to that moment as the quiet turning of a great wheel. Out on the front lines, the reality was far from the polished calm of the Temple Jedi Knights and Padawans now led battalions into battle on worlds from Christophsis to Umbra. They planned assaults, made life and death decisions in seconds, and watched comrades fall in mud, snow, and vacuum. Over time, many formed genuine bonds with the clones under their command, soldiers bred for war, yet capable of humor, loyalty, and sacrifice. Commanders, Cody Rex Bly, and countless others came to see their Jedi leaders not only as officers, but as friends. Each act of compassion on the battlefield, every effort to spare civilians or rescue the wounded, was sincere. Yet every victory pulled the Order deeper into the machinery of state power. The Jedi still meditated, still spoke of the light side and balance, but their days were measured in campaigns and casualty reports rather than quiet study. The Temple itself changed its halls, echoed with the boots of clone escorts and war briefings, where once there had been only hushed training and contemplation. Beneath it all, something older stirred. The Temple's foundations, built over an ancient Sith shrine, resonated faintly with the growing tide of fear and anger in the galaxy. And in that unseen convergence of dark side currents and righteous intentions, the stage was set for a betrayal none of the Council truly foresaw. Generals, not monks. How war reshaped the Jedi. In the months that followed, the Temple's transformation into a command center only deepened the change within the Jedi Order. Once meditation halls had echoed with quiet chanting and the soft hum of training sabers, now they glowed with hollow projectors, displaying galactic battlefronts. Strategy rooms replaced libraries, war briefings replaced philosophical debates, and the daily rhythm of the Order shifted from contemplation to deployment. A few years earlier, a Jedi Knight might have spent long stretches on diplomatic missions or in solitary study. Now rotations were measured in campaigns. Entire battalions waited on a single gesture from a robed general corridors once reserved for younglings at play. Filled with clone troopers hurrying to transports, the story of the Jedi in this era became the story of commanders rather than monks, and what followed was a subtle erosion of the very ideals that had guided them for thousands of years. Younglings felt it first. Those who entered the temple after Geonosis knew only a galaxy and war training programs adjusted to the new reality. More time was spent in combat simulations, less in the archives lessons that once lingered on the balance of the Force, and the dangers of the dark side shifted toward tactics, survival and rapid response. A Padawan's trials might come not in a carefully constructed test, but in holding a trench on Umbara or negotiating a ceasefire, while blaster fire lit the sky over time. This produced a generation whose earliest memories were of alarms and departures rather than quiet gardens and temple spires. They were still Jedi, but their instincts had been shaped by constant conflict. The Order had not intended to raise child and soldiers, yet the war pulled them inexorably in that direction. On the front lines, another change unfolded more quietly. The Jedi formed deep bonds with the clones under their command. These soldiers were bred for obedience, yet they laughed, joked, and painted symbols on their armor. They named themselves and each other. A commander's death could devastate a battalion, and a battalion's loss could haunt a single Jedi Knight. Some masters treated their troops with a gentleness usually reserved for Padawans. This act of mercy would reshape galactic history in ways none of them understood. Yet beneath the camaraderie, an unease lingered. What did it mean to lead an army grown in secret for a single purpose? What they found there would change everything for some Jedi. The realization came too late. The Republic's dependence on a manufactured army hinted at a darkness in its foundations that no one had time to fully confront on Coruscant. The Council sat in chambers crowded with tactical reports, s'il please from senators and urgent messages from distant sectors. The Force still whispered warnings, but the noise of war drowned them out. Their days vanished into logistics and crisis management, leaving less space to sense the subtle coiling of the dark side around the Senate and the Chancellor. In fighting tirelessly to save the Republic, they failed to see that the war itself had been designed to blind them, and in that blindness, the first shadows of Order 66 began to fall across their destiny. Order 66. The night the Temple fell in the end. The fall of the Jedi did not begin with blaster fire. It began years earlier in sterile laboratories and hidden orders of programming power corrupted, not through anger, but through design. The Republic's shining army of clones carried a secret in their minds, a single command buried beneath loyalty and camaraderie, waiting in silence from the earliest days of the Clone War. Kaminoan cloners and Sith conspirators had placed inhibitor chips in every clone's brain. Officially, they were safeguards against aggression and instability. In truth, they were keys to a darker command phrase. When spoken by the Supreme Chancellor, these chips would override training friendship and free will, transforming protectors into executioners with no visible struggle. This was the quiet mechanism that would shape galactic history in a single night when the moment finally came. It was almost mundane across 1,000 battlefields. Commanders paused, mid-report. Their comlinks crackled. The same calm voice carried the same simple words. Order 66. Execute. Without fanfare, without debate. Something in their minds aligned, and what followed was devastating. In its simplicity, clone troopers who had shared tents and transports with their Jedi generals turned as one raised their rifles and fired. There was no argument, no shouted betrayal, only the sudden inversion of an entire war on Coruscant. The change arrived not as a distant rumor, but as an alarm inside the Jedi. Temple. The familiar hum of training sabers and quiet study fractured into confusion. Klaxons echoed through halls that had stood for thousands of years. Younglings waiting for lessons saw armored figures where mentors should have been masters. Meditating in high spires felt the Force twist with warning. A heartbeat two late corridors that once carried the story of the Order's greatest philosophers, filled with the harsh rhythm of marching boots and blaster bolts. The great archives, the council chambers, the quiet gardens. Each became brief, isolated battlegrounds, then fell silent. Leading the assault was the figure who had once been the Temple's brightest hope. Anakin Skywalker. Now Darth Vader walked at the head of the clone detachment's robes, dark blade burning a path through the Order that had raised him, yet even here, the focus was larger than one fallen knight. This was not only the tragedy of a single man, but the deliberate unmaking of an entire spiritual tradition in one orchestrated night. The Jedi ceased to be guardians of the Republic and became fugitives in their own home. And yet the Purge was not complete. Despite the scale of the slaughter, some Jedi survived not through grand heroics alone, but through chance intuition and the stubborn will to live a shuttle that departed moments before the alarm. A master who heeded a vague disturbance in the Force and changed course. A young Padawan who fell stunned and was mistaken for dead. Over time, these scattered embers would carry forward a different memory of the Order, one that would quietly prepare the way for new hope beyond the age of the Empire. Embers in the ashes, the surviving Jedi, go to ground in the quiet that followed the slaughter. The galaxy did not fall silent. It simply changed its tone. The Jedi Order that had once filled star charts and council chambers with calm voices was reduced to whispers and rumors. Power had shifted decisively to the new empire, but in the margins of that galactic story, something smaller and more fragile endured, cut off from the temple. And from one another, scattered Jedi survivors awoke to a world in which every coded frequency was a trap, every familiar beacon a lure they faced, a choice that would shape the rest of their lives. Resist and die in open conflict, flee endlessly from world to world, or vanish completely into anonymity. Many who had spent years as generals in war now chose the most difficult path of all, to lay down the blade and disappear on a forgotten agri world beneath a pale sky. One unnamed Jedi made that choice. The story of this survivor began with a single deliberate act at the edge of a fallow field. They dug a narrow trench in the soil, wrapped their lightsaber in worn cloth, and lowered it into the ground. The hum of the weapon that had once defined their identity was replaced by the rustle of wind through crops. The force that had guided starfighters and troops now flowed through seed and rain and patient labor over time this former night. This became a farmer to distant neighbors, a quiet healer and wanderer who knew when storms would break and which herbs eased fever. They no longer stretched out through the force to sense distant battles. Instead, they felt the subtle pull in the turning of seasons, the slow growth of roots, the faint shimmer of starlight reflected in irrigation pools. The light side was no longer a weapon in hand, but a calm presence in every breath taken and every wound tended. Many survivors reached similar conclusions across the outer rim and beyond, some hid as mechanics on remote fueling stations, some as teachers in forgotten villages, some as solitary pilgrims walking from settlement to settlement offering help and refusing payment. They believed that living quietly, preserving knowledge, compassion, and restraint was a better way to honor the Jedi than hurling themselves against the Empire in futile resistance. This act of mercy would reshape galactic history, not through grand victories, but through lives quietly saved. Among the most famous of these hidden figures were Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda Kenobi, watched over Tatooine's deserts from a small hut, keeping a distant vigil on a boy beneath twin suns. Yoda sank into the mists of Dagobah on a world dense with the Force, its dark side presence masking his own. Both masters entered long contemplation, waiting for a moment the Force itself would reveal what followed. Was an age in which the Jedi as an institution were gone, yet their ideals survived as embers in countless hidden lives. And in time, those embers would be drawn toward a new spark that the Empire could not foresee. A new hope in old teachings. Obi-Wan, Yoda, and the last lessons in that hidden age of embers one figure watched from a desert of silence on Tatooine. The man once called Obi-Wan Kenobi lived beneath twin suns as a hermit named Ben. His small hut on the edge of the Dune Sea became a place of quiet exile. He listened to the wind over the sands and to the deeper current beneath. The Force itself, in that stillness, he carried the entire weight of the fallen Jedi Order, its failures and its stubborn light. Over time, his life narrowed to two tasks guarding the boy, Luke Skywalker, from a distance, and communing with the Force. He tracked Tusken raids, Imperial patrols, and the movements of smugglers. Yet his greatest journeys happened in meditation. There in the dark of the hut, he reached across the veil to his old master Qui-Gon Jinn, and to the luminous presence of the Force that had once filled the great temple on Coruscant. What followed was a long reflection on what had gone wrong and what had been worth preserving far away on the swamp world of Dagobah. Another master endured a different solitude. Yoda, the Grand Master who had guided the Order for centuries, sank into a world thick with life and decay. Dagobah was strong in the living force, its mists and tangled roots humming with unseen power, its hidden dark side cave masking his presence from the Empire. There he did, not simply wait. He trained his own mind, shedding layers of doctrine and wartime urgency that had grown around the Jedi for thousands of years, day after day. He practiced stillness, listening to the calls of unseen creatures, feeling the rise and fall of life around him. He remembered the Jedi tales of balance and the early Jedi wanderers who had served as contemplative guardians rather than generals on star maps. In that remembrance, the story of the Jedi shifted from an institution back toward a path. When Luke finally entered their lives, both masters chose a different way of teaching. The old order had taken children and shaped them from infancy. Luke arrived as an adult, scarred by loss, impulsive yet compassionate. Instead of years of structured training, Kenobi offered a brief but piercing apprenticeship on the Millennium Falcon. He placed a simple blast shield over Luke's eyes and set a training remote against him. The lesson was not about form, it was about surrendering control and trusting the unseen current of the Force on Dagobah. Yoda continued this new approach. He spoke in riddles and quiet certainties. Judge me by my size. Do you? His guidance pushed Luke toward intuition and confrontation with fear, rather than recitation of codes. He lifted stones and then an X-wing from the swamp, learning that the light side was not about power over others, but about clarity within the self. The dark side cave forced Luke to face his own shadow, a pattern interrupt to the heroic myths of Jedi Knights. Through Luke, their teachings became leaner, more personal, less bound to councils and grand halls. The Jedi tradition was not merely revived, it was transformed into something closer to its earliest wandering sages, and this act of mercy would reshape galactic history as Luke carried those last lessons toward an inevitable meeting with the Sith and with his father, the fall and redemption of Anakin. Balance in the most unlikely way. Through Luke, their teachings became leaner, more personal, less bound to councils and grand halls. The Jedi tradition was not merely revived, it was transformed into something closer to its earliest wandering sages, and this act of mercy would reshape galactic history as Luke carried those last lessons toward an inevitable meeting with the Sith. And with his father, Anakin Skywalker's path stood at the center of that meeting. The story of the Chosen One was not a simple tale of heroism, but a slow unfolding of power, fear, and consequence. He began as a gifted child found on the desert world of Tatooine, taken into the Jedi Order later than tradition allowed, burdened from the beginning by attachment to his mother, and the promise that he might bring balance to the Force. What followed was a life lived at the crossroads of prophecy and war. During the Clone Wars, Anakin became a symbol of hope, a brilliant pilot, a daring general, a Jedi Knight whose victories held the crumbling Republic together. Yet the same conflict that made him a hero also deepened the cracks within him. The Order that had once wandered as humble guardians now commanded legions in a galactic war. Their calm temples and meditation halls gave way to star destroyers and battlefronts, and over time, The line between peacekeeper and soldier grew thin. Within that tension, Anakin's fears took root. The Jedi Code had evolved for thousands of years to restrain attachment and emotion after endless conflicts with Dark Jedi and Sith, but its strict rules left him feeling watched and constrained. He loved Padme in secret. He mourned his mother in silence. He sensed the Council's mistrust and their refusal to grant him the rank of master cut deeper than they understood. Into that isolation stepped Chancellor Palpatine, a patient Sith Lord who offered understanding where the Order offered lectures and who promised power over death, where the Jedi spoke only of letting go. Anakin's fall to Darth Vader was therefore not only a personal tragedy, it was the culmination of centuries of Jedi blind spots, their distance from ordinary lives, their certainty about prophecy, their quiet decision to build their greatest temple over an ancient Sith shrine on Coruscant. All of it left them vulnerable to a darkness growing in their own capital when Anakin marched on the Jedi Temple, and when Order 66 echoed across the stars. The old Jedi way ended in fire, yet the Force moved in patterns beyond any Council's foresight. Decades later, aboard the second Death Star, the armored enforcer of the Empire faced his son, Luke Skywalker. The Emperor's lightning tore through the air, and the dark side seemed triumphant, until a single choice broke through years of conditioning. In that moment, Anakin returned. He lifted Sidious and cast him into the reactor shaft, destroying the last Dark Lord and ending the Sith line that had haunted galactic history. For the next 1,000 years, this brutal act fulfilled the Chosen One prophecy in a way no Jedi scholar had predicted. Balance did not arrive through perfect adherence to the code, but through love, guilt, and finally sacrifice. Anakin's story forced surviving Jedi and a watching galaxy to reconsider what balance truly meant. Perhaps it was not the absence of emotion, but compassion, guided by wisdom. Not the destruction of the dark side, but the refusal to let it define destiny. And in the quiet after Endor, that question lingered as new Force sensitives began to awaken. Luke's new Jedi, rebuilding from memory and myth in the quiet years after Endor. The galaxy stood between legends old and new. The Sith Empire had fallen, the last great war had ended, yet the Force did not fall silent in that stillness. The story of the Jedi narrowed to a single figure. Luke Skywalker, the farm boy who had faced Darth Vader and lived now, carried an Order's entire memory on his shoulders. Around this time, Luke was a Jedi Master, in name, but not in tradition. His formal training had been brief, a handful of intense lessons with Obi-Wan Kenobi, on the Falcon fragments of philosophy and saber work with Yoda on Dagobah, and the harsh clarity of facing the Emperor alone. What followed was an apprenticeship to ghosts more than to living teachers. He sought out lost holocrons, scattered texts, and the faintest rumors of surviving Jedi to fill in the gaps. Over time, he traced forgotten paths through the galactic fringe. He studied ruins on worlds once touched by the Jedi and the High Republic. He listened to Force echoes in abandoned temples, and even within the stones of the old Jedi Temple on Coruscant, built over an ancient dark shrine. Each discovery was partial, a code without context, a meditation without lineage. Yet piece by piece, he began to reconstruct an understanding of the light side that reached back for thousands of years. Luke also searched for people, not just knowledge. He followed instinct and the subtle pull of the Force to find potential students scattered across the stars. Children who moved objects without touching them. Pilots whose reflexes seemed impossibly sharp. Wanderers haunted by dreams of distant oceans or twin suns in them. He sensed the same quiet call that had once lifted his own gaze toward the sky. Unlike the prequel-era council, Luke did not rebuild the old rules exactly. He remembered the power of attachment that had saved Vader at the end. He refused to forbid love, yet he had seen how fear and anger could open a door to the dark side. So his teachings walked a gentler line. Students were encouraged to cherish friends and family, but to face loss with acceptance rather than possession. This act of mercy would reshape galactic history in ways he could not yet see. Eventually, Luke founded a new Jedi Academy on a secluded world, a place of stone huts, training fields and quiet forests. There he trained a small generation in lightsaber forms recovered from holocrons and in meditations refined from Yoda's lessons. He felt the heavy burden of being both the last of the old and the first of the new. Every success confirmed the possibility of renewal. Every doubt whispered that a single mistake could doom the Order again. Yet no tradition is immune to frailty, even one born from hard-won wisdom. As the Academy grew, and the students' power deepened, unseen currents in the Force began to stir, and the bright promise of Luke's new Jedi moved slowly toward its own shadow. Failure as a teacher, Ben Solo, the Temple, and Luke's exile. As the new Jedi Academy reached its height, the quiet unease beneath its success finally took form in a single student, Ben Solo, the grandson of Anakin Skywalker, born with extraordinary potential in the Force. His very bloodline carried both the brightest hope of the light side and the deepest scars of the dark side. From childhood, he felt the weight of expectation, the pull of his family's love, and the whisper that his power was destined for something more. Around this time, another presence watched and waited, Snoke, a shadowy servant of the surviving. Sith tradition reached into Ben's doubts and fears. He spoke of Darth Vader not as a warning, but as a promise. The story of Anakin's fall became for Ben a dark inheritance rather than a tragedy, to avoid caught between the compassion of his mother Leia, the roguish independence of his father Han, and the disciplined calm of his uncle Luke. He struggled to decide which path truly matched the storm inside him. What followed was a moment that would shape the fate of the Jedi. Once again, in a brief instant of terrible clarity, Luke sensed the darkness growing in Ben. The vision that came to him showed a future of slaughter and galactic war. For a heartbeat, the last Jedi Master considered an unthinkable act, then recoiled in horror. But in that fragile moment of hesitation, Ben awoke, saw only betrayal, and chose the dark side. Before any words could heal what had been broken, the destruction of the temple came swiftly and without mercy. Another night of fire against ancient stone echoing the fall of the Coruscant Temple. Under Order 66 students died in the flames. Others were cut down by Ben, and those who followed him, some vanished into the wider galaxy, carrying fragments of training and trauma into unknown lives. The sanctuary that had promised renewal became a pyre, and the Force itself seemed to fall silent around Luke's shattered dream. In the aftermath, Luke's reaction was not rage, but crushing guilt. He saw not just his own failure as a teacher, but the possibility that the Jedi path itself contained a fatal flaw. Pride had led the old order to sit atop a Sith shrine on Coruscant, blind to the dark side beneath their feet. Had he simply repeated their mistake on a smaller scale, convinced once more that wisdom alone could prevent disaster seeking answers, Luke retreated to Arch, to the ocean world where the first Jedi had once studied the Force. There, among ancient stone texts and weathered temples, he began a long meditation on Jedi history. He considered the Jedi who had once balanced light and dark, the councils that had turned struggle into dogma, the High Republic guardians who tried to project peace to the frontier, and the generals of the Clone Wars whose noble intentions helped create the very empire they opposed over time. His exile became less an escape and more a question carried into silence: was the galaxy better served by another Jedi Order, or by letting the Force find new expressions without that name? In stepping away, he did not abandon the light. Instead, he wrestled with how it should be carried forward, if at all. And somewhere beyond Arch, two events were already stirring that would demand an answer: Rey and the echo of all Jedi, a legacy. Shared, not owned. In that silence, the answer did not arrive as a council decree or a new code. It came instead as a scavenger on a desert world far from temples or archives. Rey began among the wreckage of old wars, walking the bones of fallen star destroyers on Jakku. Her life was measured in scraps of metal and portions of food, not in lessons about the Force. Yet something waited beneath the surface, a sensitivity that stirred in dreams, in sudden intuitions, in the way she reached for a staff or a starship control. without fully understanding why this was the story of a Jedi awakening without a Jedi Order around it. There were no youngling clans, no masters, reciting the modern code, refined over time, in response to Sith and Dark Jedi. Only a girl whose first contact with the wider galactic conflict came when a droid carrying a map and a fugitive stormtrooper crossed her path. What followed was a rapid unmasking of power. The Force surged through her on Takodana and Starkiller Base, raw untrained echoing the ancient Jedi who once felt both light side and dark side currents before any formal doctrine told them which to deny. When Rey finally reached Ahch-To, she did not find the heroic Grand Master of legend. Instead, she found Luke Skywalker, in exile, still haunted by the fall of his students and the shadow of Ben Solo. Their time together was brief and uneasy, yet within that fractured apprenticeship lay the timeless heart of Jedi training meditation on the cliffs, listening to the waves as if they were the Force itself, hard lessons about attachment and fear, and a descent into the dark sea cave where she confronted the unsettling reflection of her own loneliness and unanswered questions around them. The history of the Jedi seemed to press, in the first temple stones, weathered by storms, the same currents of energy once felt on Tython when the Jedi sought balance rather than purity. Luke warned her of the Jedi Order's failures of arrogance during the final days of the Republic, but Rey did not inherit his despair. She watched the conflict between light and dark play out, not as an abstract war of sides, but as a struggle within individuals, most of all within Ben Solo. Her compassion for him diverged sharply from older Jedi norms, where the Sith and their servants had often been treated as enemies to be destroyed. Rey sensed the fracture in Kylo Ren and refused to see him as fixed in darkness. This act of mercy would reshape galactic history, not by redeeming an empire, but by proving that the chain of violence stretching from the Clone Wars could still be broken by a single choice on Exegol, when she fell beneath the power of Darth Sidious and heard the voices of past Jedi calling her name. The Order's true nature became clear. The Jedi were not just a council chamber on Coruscant built above an ancient Sith shrine. They were a chorus reaching back for thousands of years to Tython, to lost temples and forgotten wanderers. Rey rose as their echo and their evolution, carrying the name Jedi forward, but with a more flexible, inclusive sense of balance, and the story of that new chapter was only beginning. Beyond the films, Ahsoka, survivors, and the many ways to be Jedi. In that new chapter, the title Jedi became less a uniform and more a question. What does it mean to serve the light side when the old halls are gone? One answer emerged in the quiet footsteps of a former Padawan walking away from the temple, yet never turning from the Force. Her name was Ahsoka Tano, introduced as Anakin Skywalker's apprentice during the Clone Wars. Ahsoka was trained in the heart of the Republic at the height of Jedi power. She learned the code sparred in bright training rooms and flew into battle under the banners of a galactic war. But what followed was a crisis that struck at the core of her faith, framed for a bombing she did not commit, hunted through the very corridors that had raised her. She watched the Order doubt her innocence when the Council finally offered to restore her status. Ahsoka made a decision that would shape the rest of her life. She refused their invitation and walked away from the Jedi Order. Her departure was not a fall to the dark side. It was a quiet indictment of institutional rigidity, a statement that the Temple had lost sight of its own compassion over. Time, her path turned her into an independent guardian, one who still listened to the Force and still risked everything to protect the vulnerable during the rise of the Empire. Ahsoka resurfaced in the shadows operating under the codename Fulcrum. She coordinated rebel cells, saved refugees, and stood against the Sith apprentice Darth Vader without ever reclaiming the formal title of Jedi. The story of Ahsoka showed that courage, mercy, and selflessness could survive even when the Council didn't. Not her white lightsabers became a symbol of distance from both Jedi dogma and Sith corruption. a quiet middle path grounded in service. She was not alone scattered across the galaxy. Other survivors and near Jedi answered the call of the Force Kanan Jarrus. Once Caleb Dume lived through Order 66 by running, then spent years hiding his past in forgotten corners of the Outer Rim. Only when the rebellion stirred did he reveal his training, taking Ezra Bridger as his Padawan aboard a small freighter instead of a great temple. Their lessons unfolded in cargo holds and city streets amid constant conflict. Ezra never knew the formal order, yet he learned to listen to the light side through friendship, sacrifice, and hard choices. His bond with creatures in the Force, his final act against Grand Admiral Thrawn, these were not the rituals of an ancient council, but the instincts of a protector acting far from Coruscant. Their stories suggested that Jedi teachings could be carried in whispered advice on a ship's deck rather than carved into marble. Together, Ahsoka, Kanan, Ezra, and others showed that the Jedi were never only an institution, they were a set of ideals: selflessness, harmony, with the Force defense of those who could not fight back in the Long Shadow after the Clone Wars and the Empire's rise. The Order's survivors became scattered lights, each adapting old wisdom to new wounds and new dangers. If the Temple had fallen on Coruscant, had the Jedi truly ended, or were they quietly changing into something else? And somewhere in the dark of that changing age, another hidden apprentice was already preparing to test the limits of those ideals. What the Jedi learned: attachment, fear, and a softer balance. In that changing age, the question of what the Jedi should be narrowed into something even more intimate. What did it mean for a Jedi to care, to love, to fear? The answer would shape not only battles and councils, but quiet choices made in hidden rooms and lonely deserts. For thousands of years, the Order had tried to solve that question with prohibition. Around the final centuries of the Republic, the Jedi Code stood in its strictest form. There is no emotion, there is peace. Attachment was treated as a doorway to the dark side. Bonds were monitored. Marriages, forbidden children, taken young to prevent deep ties to family. What followed was an era where many Jedi learned to name their feelings, yet not to live with them. They were guardians of peace, trained to be calm in war, but often unprepared for personal loss. This fear of attachment reached its tragic peak with Anakin Skywalker. His secret marriage to Padme, his visions of her death, and his terror of losing her became the lever Darth Sidious used to twist him toward the dark side. It was not love itself that broke him, but the panic beneath it, the belief that without her, there was only emptiness. The same pattern echoed later. Luke Skywalker sensed darkness in Ben Solo, and in a single terrible moment feared what his nephew might become. That flash of fear shattered trust and helped drive Ben toward the shadow. Over time, later Jedi figures began to question whether the old answer had ever truly worked. Luke, rebuilding the Order from almost nothing, allowed friendship and family to exist more openly. His bond with his sister Leia, his care for his students, and his faith in his father's redemption all stood in quiet defiance of earlier dogma. Yet his failure with Ben showed that compassion without the ability to release fear could still lead to ruin. Ahsoka, Tano walking away from the Temple rather than from the Force, carried another lesson. She did not abandon connection. She simply refused to let a failing institution define it in the era of Rey. This softer balance became clearer. She formed immediate bonds with Finn, with Leia, with Ben himself, and those ties did not consume her. Instead, she learned to feel grief and still stand to accept help, without surrendering to despair. In this, the story of the Jedi curved back toward its oldest roots on Tython, when the Jedi had once spoken of holding light side and dark side in balance, not by denial, but by awareness and discipline seen from a distance. The Jedi journey becomes an exploration of how to care deeply without being ruled by fear, a question as relevant to a single wanderer as to a galactic order. And as the tale moves forward, another generation will test whether that hard-earned wisdom can finally endure, or whether the next great conflict will force the Jedi to learn it all again. Cycles of rise and fall. The Jedi. Across the ages seen from this distance, another pattern becomes clear power. In the Force never stands still. It rises, it falters, it reshapes itself across generations. What seems permanent in one lifetime becomes a brief chapter in a much older story. The story of the Jedi is not a straight ascent into wisdom, but a long, slow spiral through light and shadow in the beginning. On Tython, the Jedi did not speak of a pure light side or an all-consuming dark side. They spoke of balance. Their temples stood between storm-racked valleys and tranquil plains, and their philosophy taught that the Force contained both fury and calm. What followed was an experiment in living with that tension instead of fleeing from it. But repeated catastrophes and dark side storms convinced many that balance through constant exposure to darkness carried too great a cost over time. This fear of falling pushed the Jedi toward a new identity. The Jedi Order emerged with a clearer rejection of the dark and a growing emphasis on rules and restraint frontier. Wanderers became robed scholars and guardians of the nascent Republic. Yet even in this early age, each attempt to codify the light created pressure beneath the surface. Frustrated seekers broke away, becoming dark Jedi, whose exile would shape galactic history for thousands of years across the old Republic era. This rhythm repeated periods of peace and contemplation, gave way to wars against Sith empires, Mandalorian crusades, and internal schisms. Councils rewrote the code to close perceived loopholes. They tightened training. They limited attachments. Every conflict that threatened to pull the Jedi toward passion and fear was answered with another layer of structure in response. Some eras produced serene archivists meditating in vast libraries. Others produced battle-hardened generals leading armies across shattered worlds. During the High Republic, the Order appeared closest to its ideals. Luminous outposts such as Starlight Beacon projected aid and diplomacy into the Outer Rim. Jedi traveled as explorers and mediators more than soldiers, yet even this golden age carried seeds of future rigidity. The confidence of success made the Order slow to see new threats and hesitant to question its own assumptions when the Clone Wars erupted. That same confidence smoothed the path from keepers of the peace to commanders in a galactic war. The militarization of the Clone Wars marked another turn in the cycle. Cloistered mystics became uniformed generals. The temple on Coruscant pulsed atop an ancient Sith shrine, and the Force there grew clouded by unseen manipulation. When Order 66 fell, the results seemed absolute. The Purge shattered the visible order, scattered survivors into exile and silence, but the pattern did not end. It changed form in the age of Luke Skywalker, and beyond the Jedi flame, passed into smaller, quieter lanterns. A farm boy on Tatooine, an exiled master on Arsh, to a solitary wanderer on desert and forest worlds, each carried forward fragments of forgotten wisdom. Some returned to balance others, to discipline some to compassionate attachment, others to renunciation. Even the darkest defeats of the Order became lessons encoded in stories, visions, and holocrons. Seen this way, every fall plants the conditions for a different kind of renewal. No era of the Jedi perfectly embodies the light, yet no catastrophe fully erases their presence. The Force moves through archivists and warriors, hermits and hopeful students alike. And as the tale turns toward the final years of the Empire and the rise of a new generation, the question is not whether the Jedi will return, but in what form their next attempt to live in harmony with the Force will appear. The Jedi and you. Quiet lessons from a distant galaxy. In the long arc of galactic history, the Jedi appear as warriors, sages, and guardians. Yet beneath the battles and councils there is a quieter story, the story of beings who spent their lives learning how to carry responsibility without being consumed by it, how to reach out to others without vanishing into their burdens, how to feel fear without surrendering to the dark side for thousands of years. Their temples rose against alien skies, from the storms of Tython to the towers of Coruscant. Every hall and meditation chamber reflected the same tension, duty, and rest, vigilance, and stillness. A Jedi might guide a world through war in one season, then spend the next in contemplation, among archives, gardens, or the open desert. Both halves were necessary without rest, judgment frayed without service. Isolation hardened into pride. Their discipline began with attention. A Jedi on ancient Tython would stand at the edge of a canyon and simply listen to the wind and the currents of the Force. Later, a knight in the High Republic might sit aboard Starlight Beacon, feeling the hum of the station and the lives it sheltered in each era. The practice was the same to notice thoughts without chasing them, to feel emotion without being dragged behind it, to sense the galaxy without being drowned in its noise. Popular tales focus on lightsabers, on duels in rain and fire, yet those were only the surface beneath. Every clash stood hours of breathing exercises, quiet walks through starship corridors, and long conversations with teachers. The greatest strength of the Jedi was rarely the blade. It was the pause before the blade, the moment in which a knight chose not to answer, panic with panic, but to wait one more heartbeat and listen for the subtle pull of the light side during the Clone Wars, when the Order was stretched across 1,000 fronts. This difference became clear. Some Jedi rushed from battlefield to battlefield, losing sleep and clarity. Others insisted on small rituals, a shared meal with clones, a brief meditation in a gunship bay, a silent gaze at hyperspace trails. What followed was not grand heroism, but something steadier commanders who could admit. Doubt without freezing healers who could witness suffering without shutting down over time. Each Jedi learned that the real conflict was not only against the Sith or the armies of an empire. It ran through their own thoughts and attachments. Anger at a fallen comrade. The ache of unspoken love. The uncertainty of prophecy. All of it moved within the same mind that recited the code. There is no emotion. There is peace. The lesson was never to erase feeling, but to respond to it with increasing wisdom. As this history drifts through the imagination, it does not demand effort. It can simply pass by thought, star by distant star. The listener and the Jedi both moving through their own light and shadow, slowly learning to pause, to breathe, and to trust that even in silence, the Force continues to flow. Drifting through the temple halls, a guided wind down. In the quiet that follows this reflection, another scene begins to take shape. Not a battlefield or a council chamber, but a temple at rest. The great Jedi temple on Coruscant stands against the night, its towers rising above the galactic city, while far below the endless traffic hums a distant, muted current of power and motion. Inside, the halls are empty. The polished stone floors hold the day's faint warmth, yet feel cool beneath imagined footsteps. Wall sconces and soft ceiling panels cast a low golden light. Shadows stretch in long, calm lines. The vast windows look out over the dark city. But here the air is still touched only by the gentle presence of the Force. This is the same temple whose foundations rest upon an ancient Sith shrine, a place where the dark side once pooled in secret for thousands of years, that buried presence and the disciplined serenity of the Jedi above it existed in quiet tension. Yet in this hour, the conflict is silent. The old war between dark and light side currents has faded to a distant echo. The corridor bends and narrow doors pass by each, leading to a meditation chamber. Generations of Jedi once knelt within those small circular rooms, some preparing for war, others seeking guidance after loss, some simply listening to the Force in the soft glow of suspended holocrons. What followed was not always revelation. Sometimes it was only the awareness of breathing the rise and fall of a living rhythm that would shape their next choice. That same rhythm can be traced now. A slow, unhurried inhale drawn in through the nose, held for a gentle moment, then released in a long, even exhale through parted lips. Each breath enters the imagination as a tide of starlight and leaves, as a quiet, receding wave, the story of the Force in miniature, flowing in and out steady and patient over time. The mind begins to follow that pattern rather than its own restless wanderings deeper within the temple. The archive doors stand partly open. Shelves climb toward high ceilings, lined with data rods and ancient tomes. Holocrons rest upon secure pedestals, each one holding voices from every era of Jedi history. Tales of the Jedi on Tython, balancing light and dark teachings from the High Republic, when stations such as Starlight Beacon shone as symbols of hope. Records of forgotten Padawans whose names never reached legend, yet whose lives still mattered. Those countless memories suggest a simple reassurance. Not every lesson must be held at once. Not every detail of this long narrative requires attention. The knowledge remains preserved, even when the conscious mind drifts and sleeps. The archives keep their quiet vigil, so that understanding can be returned to whenever it is needed. As the imagined walk continues, the temple lights dim step by step. The distant galactic hum softens the corridors, narrow into more intimate passageways, until only a few lanterns remain. Each pool of light hangs in the air, while thoughts settle around it, grain by grain, like dust in a sunbeam, suspended, untroubled, undisturbed. In this stillness, the force is not dramatic or fierce. It is simply present, a calm field in which stray concerns lose their weight, and the long war between tension and rest finally begins to yield, an unbroken thread of light. Summing up the Jedi's long journey, in that stillness, another pattern becomes clear, a single quiet thread running through everything that has come before, from the first dawn on Tython to the last embers of a fallen temple. The story of the Jedi is not a series of disconnected battles and councils. It is one continuous movement of the Force, breathing in and out through history. Long before the Republic, before Coruscant's towers and Senate debates, there were the Jedi on Tython. They walked between light side and dark side storms, seeking balance rather than denial. What followed was a long refinement of that early insight, as the Jedi fractured, and from their ruins, the first true Jedi Order emerged, choosing to lean toward the light, even as they remembered that darkness was always close at hand. Over time, schisms and wars tested that choice. Dark Jedi broke away, and the first Sith empires rose in defiance around them. Yet in each galactic conflict, the Jedi returned to the same vows, serving others, listening to the currents of the Force, and standing between frightened worlds and the next great war. From ancient councils debating the code to lone guardians on forgotten frontiers, the details shifted, but the intention remained the same through the Old Republic and into the High Republic era. This intention took on grand visible form, shining temples on Coruscant starborn beacons, such as Starlight, projecting calm into the outer rim. For thousands of years, the Order inhaled power, influence, and responsibility. The Jedi became generals, negotiators, and explorers, yet beneath the armor and robes, the quiet disciplines endured: meditation before battle, compassion before judgment, restraint before aggression. Then the breath turned. The Clone Wars dragged the Order into a conflict it had not chosen, the dark side clouded vision the Republic decayed from. Down within, and Order 66 shattered centuries of structure. In a single command, the Great Temple fell, but the current did not end. Some Jedi died with sabers drawn, others faded into small hidden lives as farmers, healers, wanderers still hearing the Force. Under new names, in the shadow of Empire, a different rhythm began. Luke Skywalker, training among ruins, rebuilding a tradition from fragments and stories. This act of mercy would reshape galactic history when he lowered his weapon before his fallen father, proving that even at the heart of Sith power, the Jedi way could still reach through hatred and fear. After Luke came Rey, walking among wrecks of star destroyers and broken legends, yet choosing again the same path. Service, courage, attention to the quiet voice beneath the noise. Orders rise and fall. Temples are razed and destroyed. Archives burn and are rewritten. But as long as a single being chooses compassion over domination, the idea of the Jedi persists. Seen this way, the entire history becomes one long breath, each golden age, an inhale, each collapse, an exhale, and always a return to a still point where the Force is simply present around the listener. Now the story has wrapped itself gently around their thoughts, a soft cloak of distant wars and quiet decisions. It can loosen and drift away at any moment, whether awareness lingers on every detail or drifts in and out of dreams. The arc of the Jedi has already reached its resting place. For now, from that resting place, the view can pull back even farther until the whole galaxy hangs in the mind as a slow turning shape, a faint spiral of distant suns and drifting worlds from far above. The noise of conflict falls away. Hyperspace lanes become pale threads of light curving between stars, and in the quiet between those threads, small pockets of calm remain places where Jedi once meditated, in stone temples on Tython, in high chambers on Coruscant, and in hidden refuges after the fall of the Order. Over time, those pockets of calm would shape more than battles. They would shape how the Force was understood. For thousands of years, what followed was never a straight ascent or a final triumph. It was the story of an order that rose and fell, that forgot and remembered, that lost entire libraries to fire and war, yet still managed to carry forward a single idea, that the light side does not vanish when towers crumble. It waits in the quiet for someone to listen again. In that distant galactic view, names begin to blur. Ajunta Pal, an ancient dark Jedi, exiles the High Republic councils and the scattered survivors of Order 66. The specific dates of each war and each fragile piece can loosen and drift away. The mind does not need to hold every campaign, every emperor, every shattered temple. For the next 1,000 years of history, the feeling of the Jedi remains without effort, a sense of calm standing against the dark, a patient courage that endures even when it cannot win. As attention softens, the story of the Jedi can become less a catalogue of events and more a gentle rhythm. There is a beginning in the storms of Tython. There are ages of exploration and guardianship. There is a fall when clones turn their weapons and star destroyers burn through the night sky. And there is a return in a lone student watching twin suns set over a desert. Even this act of mercy would reshape galactic history, not through sudden power, but through the simple choice to keep teaching, to keep believing that the light side will answer those who reach for it. Now the details can be allowed to fade. The exact wording of the Jedi Code, the layout of the Coruscant Temple, the sequence of each great war can all sink slowly beneath the surface. What remains is a quiet awareness that the galaxy turns, the Force flows, and somewhere in that vastness, there is always a small circle of calm where a Jedi once sat in silence. Whenever rest is needed, this long, gentle history can be entered again. Another night might follow different paths through the same galactic tapestry, or wander through other stories where Sith and Republic empires rise and fall in the same steady tone. For now, the tale has reached its end. For tonight, may sleep come easily. May the Force be with these dreams, and may the mind surrender fully to the quiet knowing that this story is complete until it is called upon again.